Hi, I'm going to give some hints and tips on effective revision, what's worked for my students in the past, from what I know from psychology, whether it's you're coming up to end of year assessments, it's GCSEs, actual GCSEs, mocks, the advice is the same as to kind of what works, what doesn't, and some ideas of what you can actually do during your revision. So actually, I'm going to start with what not to do, because actually, surprisingly enough, when students have been asked, what do you do to revise? The very thing that most students say they do are the things that have actually been found by science to not work at all. There's quite a famous study, Dunlosky, 2013, if anyone's asking, looking at what students did when it came to revision and then comparing that to what actually works. One of the things that most students said that they do is they highlight the things that they think is important. Unfortunately, I'm here to tell you that doesn't work. It doesn't help things go into your brain because you highlight them and then forget about them and don't read them again. So unfortunately, highlighting doesn't work. Something else that doesn't work, rereading. So 84% of students said they reread what their notes or their textbook. 55% of students said it's the only thing that they've done. And again, the research says that that just doesn't work. And then finally doing summaries, so summarising what you've looked at, maybe slightly better than the other two, but again, on its own, it's not going to work. So stop doing those things and actually start doing the things that have been found to be quite helpful. So what does work? First, be organised. Make sure you know what you need to be doing, when you need to be doing it. So when are your exams? How long are they going to last? Make sure you've got a timetable that you can stick to. Get your distractions away. So it's really common to have other maybe web pages open if you're learning on your computer or have your phone in front of you. Well, don't learn that way because it's distracting. Again, from psychology, if we don't pay attention to something, it's not going to go into our long-term memory, so it won't work. So you shouldn't obviously be doing that when you're trying to revise. You're not going to have those in front of you when you're doing your assessments either. And so it's just training your brain, conditioning yourself to get in the same mindset that you'll be when you're actually doing your exams. Forgetting. So lots of people almost give up. They think, oh, okay, I've heard this in class, but I can't remember. Oh, I'm rubbish at this subject. Well, that's not true. Actually, forgetting is a really, really important part of learning. We're never just going to remember everything that we learn. Again, from a psychological evolutionary point of view, our brains would have to be massive to remember every single thing we've heard or seen. So actually forgetting is really, really normal. So it's good to remember that for two reasons. One, you don't kick yourself when you do forget, but then two, you actually do go over things again. So it's fine to forget as long as you go back over that information. So don't just be put off because you forgot something. It's part of the learning process. Time conditions, Dunlosky 2013 study, one of the key things that they found worked was practice testing, recall practice, making sure that you're going over that information, actually going through the process of trying to get that information out of your memory. That works really, really well. So maybe ask your teacher for some sample questions. What sorts of assessment are you going to be having? You've probably been doing them in class anyway. Could you redo some questions that you've done in class that you didn't do so well on and then try it again now? If you are doing GCSEs or A-levels, there will be past papers out there. Do those. Practice testing, practice the information you'll be recalling in the way it will be recalled in time conditions. That's really, really important. Spaced learning as well. So what this means is you shouldn't be cramming. Cramming has been found to be a poor way of remembering information. Actually, you should be taking what we call the spaced learning approach, and that is little and often. So say you're doing maths, for example, so you've got your different maths topics, numbers, statistics, algebra, shape. Some people might think, right, I'm going to do a whole day or a week or a month of just on number or just on stats or just on algebra, and then I'm done, I'm putting that away. Well, actually, that's been found to be a poor form of remembering. So what we need is what we call retrieval practice. So actually picking up information and recalling it often. So what you're better off doing is breaking those topics down into smaller chunks and doing them little and often. So as we say here, we might have at the bottom number, statistic, algebra, shape, and then going back over that number, statistic, algebra, shape. So it might be that you revise some number, to begin with. You leave it to one side, you revise some statistics, you revise some algebra, you revise some shape, and then you go back to it. You might give yourself a question, a test question on number, a test question on statistics, a test question on algebra, a test question on shape, and then you go back and check your answers. So you're constantly going over that information in smaller chunks. That has been found to be a lot more successful in recall than cramming and doing loads of information all at once. It's called retrieval practice, and again, there's some psychology behind it that proves that that's a really good method of recalling information. What else works? So yeah, focusing on specific areas. So you need to, first you need to find out what don't you know, and obviously then focus on those areas to try to recall them. As I already said, you're going to forget some things. Well, what is it that you've forgotten and what do you already know? And we can use what we call the RAG, or the red, amber, green method for this. So get a list of the topics that you're going to be testing, whether that is you need to go to your teacher and say, okay, what are these assessments going to be on? Or whether it is GCSE or A-level where you've got a specification, you can then go over the different topics and say, right, do I know that or not? If it's something you've never heard of, that's red, you don't know it. If it's something you're okay at, but you think you need a bit more, that's amber. And if it's something you think, right, I've got this nailed, that's green. So what that then means is you're focusing your attention. You then know what to focus on when it actually comes to this revision or practice questions, because those are the areas that you need more help on. And there are some sheets. I'll see if I can put a link in the video here to a red, amber, green sheet that you can fill in the topics and go for. And as I've said before, you need to be active. That is why the highlighting and the summaries and the rereading don't work, because they're passive. You need to do something with the information rather than just highlighting it or reading it. No, can you turn that information into something else? Can you make a mind map? I'll speak about that in a moment. Can you do some questions on it? Can you come up with some questions? Write your own exam? Could you work with a friend and write an exam paper for each other? That requires some active recall, because you're going to have to think, right, what are the sorts of questions I can get? You're then going to have to write the mark scheme, and then if you swap it over, that's a really, really good task to do, because you're being active the whole time when it's coming up with the questions, coming up with the mark scheme, and then answering each other's. You can then mark each other's as well. There you go. There are 4 things you can do: come up with the questions, come up with the mark scheme, answer each other's, and then mark each other's. 4 things that are all active and will all really help you. So yeah, I said I'll come up with this bit of psychology in here for you. So our evolution, our brains are designed to deal with visual information. The whole time we've evolved, it's been visual until really, really recently, writing was invented. So if human evolution was 24 hours, writing would have been invented at 11:58 p.m. So very, very short amount of time. So our brain is actually hardwired to deal with images and isn't as well evolved at dealing with written information. What does that mean when it comes to revision? Well, it means that you should be dealing with that. You should be using that to your advantage. Can you turn the information that you need to remember into visual information? This is where mind maps become quite helpful. A mistake that some people make is they turn mind maps into words. Well, actually, it's the symbols, it's the images that really help with that. There's a process called dual coding that really helps. Can you link images so you're synchronously remembering information? It's not just the words, but the images as well. And you get this is a thing, memory championships. So people can remember decks of cards or the number pi to thousands of decimal places. How do they do it? Well, they're not actually remembering the cards or the numbers. They turn those things into visual images, and they go back through that visual image in their mind to help them recall it. It's called the method of loci. It's been around since the ancient Greeks. That's a really good method. How can you use that? As I say, use dual coding or use your mind maps for visual information. Acronyms can help with that as well. So you're condensing down the information you need to remember. So if you're trying to remember the colours of the rainbow, Roy G. Biv is something, or Richard of York gave battle in vain. So actually you're turning this information maybe into visual information and maybe into information that linking it to your long-term memory to help you hook it out. They're called retrieval cues. And anxiety. So lots of people seem to think, oh, I'm really nervous, I'm not very good, and almost give up. Actually, it's good to be anxious. obviously to an extent. If you weren't anxious, if you didn't care about an exam, if you didn't care about doing well, you wouldn't get anxious about it. So actually you almost need to train yourself. Okay, yeah, it's fine. Maybe you've got butterflies in your tummy, or your palms are sweaty, and you're it just means you're worried about it, but in a good way. Actually, we need to be a bit worried to perform. If we were just not worried and didn't care about anything, then you wouldn't perform at all. It's actually called the Yerkes-Dodson law. And you need that. You need that to get going. It's just when it goes over the top that you need to, that it could hinder you and not be very good. So don't just completely give up if you're a little bit anxious. Actually, it's the anxiety that's going to keep you going, and the want to do well. And finally, actually, above all of this, really, if you're not looking after yourself, if you're not eating well, if you're not sleeping, if you haven't got a good diet, if you're not doing exercise, that's all going to go against you. And actually, that might lead to the bad side of the anxiety. You need to try and keep a good routine. You need to try and drink lots of water, sleep well, and be in control. And that goes back to the organisation and not having the distractions that I was speaking about before. All of those things can help. I've spoken about a couple of ideas already on what you can do in paired learning, making these exam papers, but there's a few others as well. So I've seen this, I've used this revision clock. So again, I'll try and put a link to this. So you get this, any subject, any topic, you can use this, 5 minutes. Right, can you go through these different areas? What can you recall? So this is the being active part of it, as I said, and rather than just passively looking at highlighting and rereading things. Right, what can you recall? You've got that, you then compare it to your notes or your textbook or whatever you've looked at in class. Have you covered everything? Probably not, so you can then fill in the things. You can fill in the sections with what you haven't done, and then maybe put that away. Again, a bit of spaced practice, go on to something else, come back to it, reread it, and then try to recall it again. And what you'll find, you do this a couple of times, and your third attempt should be better than your first, because you've done that retrieval practice, and you've got things in here. And again, that uses that spaced learning to try to help you to recall information. There's lots of websites that can really help as well. So Quizlet, Quizlet's really good. Any languages, MFL, will probably use Quizlet. It's learning different terminology. It's like a cue card site. If you haven't used it before, I'd really recommend it. But actually, again, any subject. Subjects are just reading. Subjects are just learning terminology. And so actually, any subject that you look at, if you've got your terms really well and you can define terminology, that will be really helpful. So get onto Quizlet for any topic that you're doing. And again, if you make these, so that I know on Quizlet there are pre-made ones, but what I was speaking about earlier, you need to be active about it. If you use a pre-made one, you haven't gone through the effort, the cognitive effort of actually making those. So you're much better off making your own Quizlet cards and then using those, because that's 2 bits of revision. 1, the making it, and 2, the doing it. I mentioned mind maps before because, again, the active, because of the visual side of things. Creately or Coggle are the online mind map software. There's lots of them as well. And again, I mentioned about the mental health side of things, making sure you're eating well and staying hydrated. And sometimes one of the things that I often get is parents not knowing how to help their sons or daughters to revise, whatever age they are. The Parents Guide 2, and a kind of a new site, they're really, really good. They produce guides. There's free ones. There's ones you can buy into if you want to. But there's loads of good advice on there on how, 1, students can stay healthy, but 2, how parents can help in this process. And again, managing those things such as the mental health side of things, anxiety, and how to deal with some of the stresses that go along with this. The other thing I'd say is that the feedback that I get from parents and students is, oh, I don't know how to revise. I've never been taught. Well, actually, what you find is that you are taught through classes, through doing these subjects. And actually, it might not be necessarily explicit, although sometimes it is. This is how you revise. Actually, you will learn your methods. And actually, when you're younger, it's better to try new things and see if it works. So actually, when it comes to the time that you're doing your GCSEs or your A-levels or beyond, you've actually tried a few of these things and you know what works for you. There's no one thing that's going to work for everyone. You're going to have to try different things and see what works and maybe refine it, and you'll find something. Best of luck in whatever assessment it is you're doing, and yeah, go and smash it. Try some of these things.